Good morning, everybody. You might notice something different this morning, and that's that we're coming live from the Connect Center. We're experimenting with a new streaming setup. So if everything disappears and everything collapses, you know the reason why, but hopefully that won't happen. So yeah, just good morning. I don't know how your week has been this week. We're in week 4 of lockdown. I'm hoping that this is a third of the way through this hopefully last lockdown, but it's of course not easy. And this week, of course, we remember the passing of Norman Plymon. When I think of Norman, I think of how much of an encourager he was, and I think of his dedication as a disciple of Jesus, like that everything in his life was around being a disciple. And it also reminds me how we need each other, how we need the older generation and the younger generation, and the middle generation that I probably count myself in, to encourage one another and to work together as a community. Like I think for my lasting memory of Norman is when we did a prophecy training evening in the Connect Center about 1.5 years ago. And just Norman sharing at that point and just encouraging us younger people in that gifting and just explaining what it was like for him. And that was such an encouragement to me, and I know others in the room, just to hear from somebody older, to hear them encouraging us and sharing his experience. So yeah, we just want to remember Norman and remember Dorothy today, who is, of course, in grief because of the death of her husband, but just also to be encouraged and realize that we, as you know, and I also think of Martin's passing over this last year as well, and realize that these are disciples of Jesus that have left us, and that leaves a gap for us to stand up and take their place. So to be encouraged to fill the shoes of those that have gone before us. There is a tribute to Norman on the website. If you go to the blog section of the website, if you haven't been to the website so far, it's connectchristianfellowship.com. If you go to the blog section, there is a tribute by William Kennedy to Norman. You can add your own responses to that. There's a comment section underneath the blog, and you can submit your thoughts or memories to Norman there. So this morning we're continuing our series on Philippians. We will have Rob speaking on Philippians Chapter 2. Patrick Walsh will be reading from Philippians 2 in the Message version. But as I was thinking of Philippians and the whole topic on the joy of suffering, the joy in suffering, I was thinking, well, what was it about Paul that gave him that joy no matter what his circumstances were? And sometimes when you read the Bible, you kind of have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. It's almost like reading between the lines. Sometimes you have to step back to see the wood from the trees. And just looking at the book of Philippians and taking a step back, I was asking myself the question, well, what do I see? Like, what do I see in Paul that would stir up that joy within him? And as I look at that, you know, taking a step back and reading between the lines, what I see is a person in the Apostle Paul that was consumed with the mission and character of Jesus. Like, that was the lens through which he saw everything in his life. Everything was through that lens, about him becoming more like Jesus and him being involved in the mission of Jesus to build a multi-ethnic, diverse community that were following the King Jesus. And he was committed to the gospel. And I have a picture here of what the gospel actually means, but when we think of the gospel, sometimes that word loses its power. I think for me, it loses its power because I've heard it so many times in my youth, and sometimes in situations that aren't, maybe great, or maybe yeah, it's been used so much that it loses its power for me. So I was thinking, well, what does it actually mean? And it comes from the Greek word euangelikon, which means good announcement. It's good news, a good announcement. And what is the good announcement that Paul was so excited by and that consumed his life? And that good announcement was the announcement that the King has arrived. King Jesus has arrived. The Messiah has arrived. And with him, he brings his kingdom. And in his kingdom, the rules are very different to the world around us. So that was what consumed the heart and the mind and life of Paul. And I think, if we're thinking of having joy in suffering, I'm not sure if we can expect to have the same result that Paul had unless we are thinking in the same way, unless our hearts are transformed into being consumed with the character of the King. Like, that's who we're trying to become. And we're consumed with the mission of the King, of sharing his kingdom to the world around us. And it's very easy, I think, in today's, I guess at any point in history, but especially today, to be trapped into thinking in a wrong way. And even in this lockdown, I think there's so many distractions that we can have. There's endless hours on Netflix and Disney Plus or whatever, but we can distract ourselves and we can get into thinking wrong thoughts, and also that our mind is set on the wrong thing. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about an elephant trap. So when we were living in India, my landlord, who was a guy in his mid-70s, lived through the British being in India. Used to tell me stories of the British playing golf in Calicut. But he described to me when they used to trap wild elephants, and they used to dig a hole, like you can see here, in the path that an elephant normally walks, and they would cover the hole over with sticks and branches to disguise it, but the elephant would fall in. And once the elephant was in, it couldn't get out. The walls were too steep. The only way the elephant could get out was actually with the help of another, and with the help of somebody to build a ramp down into the pit so that the elephant could walk back up. And I was kind of thinking about our thought process, and that it's so easy to fall into a trap. It's so easy to fall, even during lockdown, even if we're at home a lot, to fall into just wrong thinking about who we are, wrong thinking about what is the lens that we interpret the world through. Like, how do we, if our joy is linked to, if it's linked to our success or linked to our finances, then of course we won't have joy if those things are not working out. But in the book of Philippians, Paul is trying to tell us to transform our thinking, and he gives a lot of actions. And I'm always trying to think about, well, how do you connect sort of teaching and action together? And Paul says to his audience things like, he says, I want you to understand what really matters. The righteous character produced in your life by Jesus Christ. He says other sentences like, loving one another and working together with one mind and purpose. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourself. Work hard to show the results of your salvation. He says, but I focus on this one thing. And even in that phrase, but I focus on this one thing, there's a choice that he made to have his mind in a certain place, to have his mind on the King and on the mission of the King. He says things like, don't worry about anything, instead pray. Other sentences like, for God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him. But I could put in there, but not forcing you. We still have a choice. He says, to shine like bright lights in the world, to fix your thoughts on what is true, to keep putting into practice all that you have learned. So there is a choice in this. There's a choice to fix our mind on King Jesus and the rules of his kingdom. And I think, if looking at the book of Philippians, that is when we do that and when we follow the words of Paul, which is to imitate what he was doing and the way he was living, and imitate where his mind was fixed upon, and it's through that his joy comes, because then he interprets the world through that lens and not through the lens of those around him. So my encouragement to myself is to announce the good news to myself that the King has arrived. And in his kingdom, he comes to proclaim favor on me and favor on the world around us and favor to others through me as well. He is here to bind up the brokenhearted. And that might be me, or it might be others through me. But that's the purpose of the King and his kingdom, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim good news, to proclaim favor to the world. So we may need, like elephants trapped, we may need somebody to help us remember that, to help us to get out of the trap of thinking wrong. But there's always a choice involved for us. So my encouragement for the week is just to take the time to focus our mind on what is true, to focus our mind on the good news. I'm hesitant to say the word gospel because of the fact that it may not have the same power to say the good announcement of the King Jesus has arrived and he is bringing his kingdom to earth through us. So we're going to have a reading next from Patrick, and he's going to read chapter 2 of Philippians, and it's in the Message version. So we'll listen to him now, and then after that we will go to Rob, where he will do his talk on Philippians 2.
Philippians Chapter 2, verse 1 to 30. If you've gotten anything out of following Christ, if his love has made any difference in your life, if being in a community of the Spirit means anything to you, if you have a heart, if you care, then do me a favour. Agree with each other, love each other, be deep spirit friends. Don't push your way to the front. Don't sweet talk your way to the top. Put yourself aside and help others get ahead. Don't be obsessed with getting your own advantage. Forget yourself long enough to lend a helping hand. Think of yourself the way Christ Jesus thought of himself. He had equal status with God, but didn't think so much of himself that he had cling to the advantages of the status no matter what. Not at all. When the time came, he set aside the privileges and identity and took on the status of a slave. Become human. Having become human, he stayed human. It was an incredibly humbling process. He didn't claim special, obedient life and then died a selfish, obedient death. And the worst kind of death at that, a crucifixion. Because of the obedience, God lifted him high and honoured him far beyond anyone or anything ever, so that all created beings in heaven and on earth, even those long ago dead and buried, will bow and worship before this Jesus Christ and call out in praise that he is the master of all, to the glorious honour of God the Father. What I'm getting at, friends, is that you should simply keep on doing what you're doing from the beginning. When I was living among you, you lived in responsive obedience. Now that I'm separated from you, keep it up. Better yet, redouble your efforts. Be energetic in your life of salvation, referred and sensitive before God. That energy is God's energy, an energy deep within you. God himself willing and working at what will give him the most pleasure. Do everything readily and cheerfully, no bickering, no second guessing allowed. Go out into the world uncorrupt, a breath of fresh air in this squalid and poor society. Provide people with a glimpse of good living and of the living God. Carry the light-giving message into the night, so I'll have good cause to be proud of you on the day that Christ returns. You'll be living proof that I didn't go to all this work for nothing. Even if I'm exalted here and now, I'll rejoice in being an element in the offering of your faith that you made Christ altar, a part of your rejoicing. Be turnabout's fair play. You must join me in rejoicing. Whatever you do, don't feel sorry for me, according to Jesus' plan. To send Timothy to you very soon so he can bring back all the news of you he can gather. Oh, how that will do my heart good. I have no one quite like Timothy. He is loyal and genuine concern for you. Most people around here are looking out for themselves, with little concern for the things of Jesus, but you know yourself that Timothy's the real thing. He's been a devoted son to me. As soon as I see how things are going to fall out from me here, I plan to send him off, and then I am hoping and praying to be right on his heels. But for right now, I'm dispatching Epaphroditus, my good friend and companion in my work. You sent him to help me out. Now I'm sending him to help you out. He has been wanting in the worst way to get back with you, especially since recovering from the illness you heard about. He's been wanting to get back and reassure you that he is fine. He nearly died, as you know, but God had mercy on him, and not only on him, he had mercy on me too. His death would have been one huge grief pile on top of all the others. So you can see why I'm so delighted to send him to you. When you see him again, hail and heartily, how you rejoice and how received I'll be. Give him a grand welcome, a joyful embrace. People like him deserve the best you can give. Remember the ministry to me that you started but weren't able to complete. Well, in the process of finishing up that work, he put his life on the line and nearly died doing it.
Okay. Morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Great to be back in Connect in the centre here. I live 5 minutes down the road, so it was great to just come. I just want to introduce myself. I know we've been back a few weeks, but there might be some of you who don't really know who we are or our kind of context. And so I'm married with 5 great kids, and we joined the Connect. It was then the Barn, probably in about 1997, shortly after we got married, and really just fell in love with the fellowship, fell in love with the people, and started our own journey of what it means to serve as believers. And in 2003, we left for South Africa as a family. We had been praying with a group of people every Monday for about 18 months, who came to our house every Monday to just pray with us. And when I think about that now, these were families that had children like ourselves, but they came to us. They were busy, they had lots of stuff to do, and yet they served us, they served the Lord amazingly by just coming to our house and being with us. And so the church sent us as missionaries. We had a calling. We have all these lovely words. We had a calling. We felt that we wanted to go and serve the Lord. And so we went to South Africa as missionaries, which meant that the church was sending us. There were a number of people who financially supported us, prayed with us, came to visit us, but that we were sent to another country to go and serve the people of that country. And we went for 2 years, which turned into 3 years, 4 years, 5, 10, 15, 17 and a half years. And we grew from a family of 3 children to a family of 5 children, so 7 of us. So I'll just show you a picture of us all now. This was taken in Pietermaritzburg shortly before we left. And we, after 17 and a half years, felt the Lord speaking to us that our time was to come back, and that was to each of us, to myself, my wife, and to each of our kids individually, and to come back. And so I'm going to show you, I'm going to go through a journey really. You know, the title for this message is the joy in serving. And we all know that serving is lovely. You know, when I say to my kids, please will you help me? And they say, yes, Dad, what do you want? I'll say, please you go and mow the lawn. Please will you come and wash my car? Or do those kind of things. We always, all of us, I'm not the only one who doesn't just do that kind of stuff. But to just kind of think that you don't have to be a missionary sent overseas to serve, that actually we're all called to serve. Whenever I was listening to Chris speaking last week, it just reminded me so much of the opportunities that we have as believers in this world today, sitting in this country, to be able to serve. We heard about the persecuted church. And I remember Martin Ollie saying to me many years ago, Rob, I'd rather be in the palm of God's hand than dangling on his fingertips. And so for some of us, that means leaving countries and going to other countries. And for some of us, that just means talking to our neighbors. Because serving isn't about going to another place. It's a heart decision that the Lord puts in each and every single one of us. And so for some of us, it is that we need to go away and to serve in other countries. But actually, it's about the servant heart that we have and the joy that we get from that, from being involved in that. Hazel Patterson sent me a WhatsApp this week. I love it when she does, because they always come at the right time. So Hazel, just carry on doing that. If you want to do it to anyone else, please. I don't need to give you permission to do that, but you can carry on. And it was from Isaiah 49, and it says, see, I engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are ever before me. And that's what God does. I believe that he has a plan for every single one of us to be a unique footprint in this earth whilst we're here, so that we can all experience the joy of being able to serve others and to do it well. These are some pictures of us in South Africa with some people. These are old pictures. Maybe some of you have seen them before. But these are some of the people that God wanted us to touch. This young girl in the middle, there's a young girl called Tulasila. I baptized her. She's the only girl that ever gave me Father's Day cards. And she's the same girl on the left-hand side of your picture there with the bigger legs and the big smile. She died on her own. But we were with her. There were 13 of us in our staff team who were with her in her bed as she passed away. The young boy that Debbie's holding there, no one else wanted to touch. And so we had such an opportunity to be involved in the lives of people that no one else actually really wanted to be involved with. Next slide there. This young man, no one wanted to touch him. He was like a leper in his own community. His family had disowned him. The medical staff had nothing for him. And yet, there's something in me that I know God has helped me understand more. I've had to apply for a couple of jobs, and you put your CVs in, and they ask you for your experience and what you do and all these things, and you try and put it all down. And I just got thinking about, how do we actually do that? What's our purpose? I ask people in leadership, what's your purpose? And they often talk about their employment, and I said, well, no, that's not your purpose, that's your job. And then they'll talk about how they raise their children or how they do stuff around the home. And I said, well, that's actually your responsibility. What's your purpose? And I've prayed and I've seeked, and for me it's quite simple. It's to be kinder and love more. And you can't really write that on a CV. They won't maybe give you a job to do that. But for me, I just love that. That for myself, it's to be kinder and to love more. And if I can do that for the people who are around me, then that's what I want to do. The next slide. These are just a few more images and the areas when we talk about the community. This is the community that we talk about, very poor, very impoverished people who have a resilience beyond note. I've been in prayer meetings where I know in the family situation there's no running water, there's no electricity, there's huge problems. And before the music's even started, one or two of the ladies are up jumping for joy as they serve with actually having nothing behind them materially. That's the kind of service. I see people coming to work where there's been huge storms and rain. I'm late, but they're there, and yet they've had hours to spend cleaning the floors, getting the kids ready, just sorting out all the mess from the storm that happened in the first place, because they live in tin roofs and mud floors, and they come. And I've reflected thinking, what was my role in South Africa? Was it to do more for other people, or was it for God to speak more into my life so that he can make me a better human for what happens next? And that's the truth, because I could do nothing. It was God that did everything. And I'll talk about that a bit later, because sometimes there's loads of joy and sometimes there's no joy at all in serving. And that's still anyway, we'll talk about that. Next slide there, please. Some things are not so good to do. I remember this young man. I even remember the smell. But there was no one else that would go and see him and help him. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Oh, no, sorry, me now. So you can zoom back to me now. See, we're just doing this technology thing. You can't hear us. I know that. So, all right, I'll carry on talking while they're sorting out. So you're going to see me now. These videos, we'll see them just now. Philippians 2 is a massive meal to try and accommodate. There's just so much in it, and I can't do justice to the whole of the passage, but I will try and go through a journey. And the first one was around serving, and that's why I showed you those videos. And to try and again say that service isn't about having to go to these out of way places to actually be able to do that. Verse 3 in Philippians 2 says, "Do nothing out of self-ambition or vain conceit." And I know none of us do that, but sometimes we love to be patted on the shoulder for the things that we've done, to be appreciated, to be valued. Certainly not nice to just do stuff and to not have those things. But it's important to actually understand our motives for what it is we do and how we do those things. Further on in the passage there, it talks about Jesus humbling himself, the very nature of a servant, slaving away, even obedient to death. And our role, our function, our joy isn't about the appreciation that we get for what we do, but it's about knowing that we're doing it for the Lord. Slaving away, being a servant heart. I love to serve. Sometimes when you serve, you can be taken advantage of. But it shows us here very clearly in Scripture that it's to check our hearts and our motivation for what we do and how we do it, knowing that if we come with the presence of God within us, that it will shine, and that it can shine the best way that it does. I remember working in a law firm. A pastor, a friend of mine, asked me to come in and do some leadership stuff, and I spoke with the accountant, and he smiled with great joy and said, "The best time of my day is 10:30 in the morning." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I've got all the receipts of the company and I've got everything in order financially, and I know that everything is good." And I said, "That must be the most boring job in the whole wide world." Sorry for any accountants who are out there. I said, "How can that be exciting?" He says, "Because what I've done is I've served my company well. I know everything is in order." And so it isn't about what people see, but it's about what your heart is and how you serve the people who are around you. I remember a while ago, it was a long time ago, I spoke in the barn at that point, and I shared about a time in my life when joy wasn't happening so well, and I didn't really quite know what I was doing in my workspace. I had burnt out and was really struggling and still working. And I'd spoken, and this lady came up to me who I didn't really know. I'd known her in the background, but I didn't really know her. And she came up to me and she started to share some stuff. And she gave me this book. It was Susan Williamson. You'll notice a bit of a theme. I'm mentioning people's names, and I'm doing that on purpose because it's about the small things that people do that can have a massive impact. And she gave me this book, and in this book was scriptures upon scriptures that she used whenever stuff wasn't going so well for her. And she did it to encourage me. And that act of service has stayed. This book, as you can see, it's about 10 years old. It's still nice. It's not torn. It's in my bedside locker. I keep it there. And so, Susan, thank you so much for doing that. No one else knows that. So if you get some phone calls or emails asking you for a book, maybe you can do that for you as well. But I know that this came from your heart. This came from experience. This came from, I want to serve Rob. I'm sure it gave you great joy, but it gave me immense joy and will stay with me. And I've shared this with many other people before. And so that's some of the joy of doing what we do. Just ask God, what am I really good at doing? How can you help me do it to serve other people? And I'm going to get great satisfaction from doing it. You know, we can't be like everybody else. We can't try and imitate to be like another speaker or another doer or another encourager. You just need to be the best authentic version of you so that you can fulfill what God has for you. The next area I want to talk around is around obedience. It goes further on in that passage. It says, do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you become blameless and pure children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Can you imagine that? Do everything without grumbling or arguing. So I know I do a lot of stuff with grumbling and sometimes arguing. I remember a really dear friend of mine, he's a lawyer as well, an advocate in Petermarisburg, Avril his name is, and we did a leadership training thing for cell group, any leader in the church. And he came in and he said something which really stuck with me. He says, the worst thing to be is to be a reluctant leader. God has given you this role to do something, whether it's young mums, children, the coffee, the door, don't be reluctant. And that really stuck with me, that there's an obedience to say, if God has put you in this position to do something, that you must do it without grumbling and without arguing. In March 28th of 2020, I'm going to show you just a couple of videos now and a testimony, but I just want to give you context to that situation. Obviously, like the world over, lockdown was happening, and for many people, there was a time when they slowed down for opportunity, because our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, had said 7 days beforehand, before lockdown, was that there was to be no homeless person standing on the streets, because this was about infection control, and that we had to have this very vulnerable group of people needed to be off the streets so that we could have safety. And our lockdown, I don't know what yours was like, but ours was on the 28th at midnight. The army came into town and the police, and it was a ghost town and no one was allowed. There were police checks everywhere. You were turned away. No one was allowed onto the streets. And so we had a huge opportunity, and I contacted the provincial office and said, the president has told us you need to have a shelter and you haven't got one. We want to help you. And so that's what they did. They invited us in. I went to the mayor's office every day with all the heads of officials for 3.5 months at 8 o'clock in the morning. And we were able to set up this shelter. Now, this was not a fancy shelter, and they weren't treated with much love or care, but we had an opportunity to be in there. And I just want to show you a couple of videos just to give you, to just see what God can do in the midst of some real pain. COVID-19. As you can see, social distancing was observed really well. This wasn't about infection control. This wasn't about care. This was about just keeping people contained in a space. that day of that video was very cold, it was raining. Food was distributed on the end of a van so that people wouldn't have contact. I remember the first day that we were there, myself and Tommy, my colleague, he's in Peter Maritzburg today, and my other colleague, Caroline, I think they also have dialed in, so hi guys. I remember we went there and you had these 300 people, 350 men, 150 women, petrified. They couldn't have access to the drugs that they normally use. They didn't even know why they were there. They'd been herded like sheep into the space, and they were hungry. And there was about 50 officials, social workers, police, people from the municipality around, and now it was to feed them. And no one really knew how to do that. So what they did is that they developed a chain. So these people had this food in these little food packages, and one person would pass it to the next person, pass it to the next person, pass it to the next person. And so there was about 50 people in the line, and the people who were at the end of the line was myself and Tommy, so that we would actually have human contact with the next person who would receive the food. You see, the other officials who were there, I don't know whether they knew Jesus or not, but they were grumbling and they were moaning and they were arguing. They did not want to have direct contact with people from a different community group. And we just had an awesome opportunity to do that. I was once asked, Rob, why do you do this? How do you get out there and do that? And for me, it's like my playground. To be able to play in a space where I know God has called me to really excites me. And that's my prayer for all of us, is to look at where we're at and what we're doing and saying, God, is this the place that you want me to be in? Am I being obedient to you in where I am and what I do? I just want to share this testimony with you. Hi, my name's Rob. I'm a social worker, and I've had the privilege of working with Tommy for the last 3 weeks, helping the municipality develop a homeless project for the homeless guys and girls in our city. We've been working there for the last 3 weeks, and it's been great. And we had an opportunity this Sunday to go and carry on doing some work that we were doing with them. And during the night, I really wrestled with God to know that we were going there for the right reasons. And I believe God gave me this in Luke 1 verse 3, and it says, "Therefore, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, it seemed good also to me to write an orderly account for you." And I believe that our role was there to find out an eyewitness testimony from the young people what it is like to be abandoned and lost and to live on the streets. And so we decided to go and to carry on doing the work that we were doing, but we also wanted to share a message. And I woke up in the morning and I knew that I didn't want to just do an ordinary message. I don't want to just go there with Tommy. We preach, we sing some songs, so people put their hands up, because that's very easy almost for a very, very vulnerable group of people, and please hear me right in that sense. And so I just prayed and said, God, please, when we go there, make it a different expression, make it real and really valuable to you. And so we arrived there on Sunday, and the young people were very cross. Tommy had to spend a lot of time doing some putting out fires there because of the issues that had gone on, and I wasn't able to share the things that I wanted to share, but just shared some personal stories about being selfless and not being selfish, and this is what they were being. And then we began to do our work with them, really along a lifeline from the date they were born to the date they are now, and to look at the highlights and low points in their life. And as we were there, this young girl came towards me, who I've never seen before. She had come after we had been there before, and she looks at me and says, "Can you help me find Jesus?" And I was utterly blown away that this young woman who had never even heard us there before share a word just came to us and just asked that question. I sent Tommy a message in the morning and said, please, let's not wear our One Life Foundation shirts today. We are going as One Life Church, and I want us to go there. And it was amazing. And I prayed with her and led her to the Lord. And it was just such a privilege. I moved my bus closer so we could play some music. And as I did that, this other young woman approached me, who again had only been there for a couple of days and hadn't been there when Tommy and I had been there on the Friday. And she started listening to the music, and she called me over and she asked me the same thing. She says, "Do you think you can help me find Jesus?" And I prayed with her and I asked her if I could take a video of what happened next. And she said yes. And so I just want to share this with you. Thanks.
There was a time when I was trying to quit, like smoking drugs on my own. what I used to do is I used to listen to some of the gospel music, especially from One Life. And yeah, whenever I used to listen to the gospel songs, the pain would like subside. I used to play it, especially when I used to feel pain or whatever. So whenever I listen, pain will subside and I'll feel a lot better, you know. Well, I've actually given myself to God, and I've accepted Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior.
So that for us was just an awesome opportunity. You know, we didn't want to just do the same old, and God just turned the whole thing upside down to do it His kind of way. And we came home that Sunday, just blown away. Now, what happened after that is, after having set up the shelters and being involved in the shelters for 3.5 months, we were banned from the shelters. You see, we were doing things that were a bit different, I think. In South Africa, there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of people that do things for self kind of gain. And yet we went every Sunday to that shelter, for the women's shelter, and we ran a church service. We had a cell group running during the day for the men's, which Tommy was up and running. And at that time, we didn't understand why we were taken away. I was very hurt about why that could happen, but I know that God had a different plan to do stuff for me and for the young people who were there. Further on in the Philippians 2, it talks about the whole area of fathering. It says, as a father with his son here, served me well. And that's Paul talking about Timothy. And as a father, we all want to be able to raise our kids up and to let them leave and to do their stuff well. And I just spoken to my son the other day. We were trying to set up a project last February around how we engage with young people who are very much at risk to be fathered and mentored. And whilst we were in church, I shared our story about how Caleb, my adopted son, had come into our lives, and how the Lord had spoken to my wife, and then spoken to me, and then spoken to my older son Marcel, and then spoken to my mum in France, and even then spoken to Caleb. And as I was sharing this very intimate story with these strangers to my son, I could see him in the corner kind of squirming and kind of looking really embarrassed. And I thought, oh my goodness, here I am sharing this whole thing that I think is really good about what God has done to see how my son can serve, and yet he's struggling. So in the car, I said to him, Caleb, bud, I'm so sorry, man, if I spoke out of turn or I made you feel embarrassed in any way. And he said to me, Dad, what do you mean? And I said, well, you just looked so awkward and uncomfortable. So I said, when Dad speaks like this, what does it make you feel? And he said, Dad, it makes me feel like I belong. And that wasn't the answer that I was expecting. Dad, it makes me feel like I belong. You know, Davey and Linda Hoy were with us many years ago before we adopted Caleb, and shared with us Psalm 68. God puts a lonely into families. And you know what? I know that there are a lot of lonely people. And from that scripture, it tells me that there are enough families to be able to look after some of these lonely people. And that's a great opportunity that we have as a church to be able to do that. In our own way that we serve and how we want to serve, to pick up the phone as we do, I know we do that, but to do it a bit more, there's a whole lot of stuff that we can do. Further on in that passage, when it talks about sending out Timothy, it says in 23, so that he can be sent. So that he, my son, who I'm mentoring, well, there's my son, that he can be sent to go and share the good news, as Nigel was sharing earlier, and be involved. You know, Nigel and I, we spoke a little bit this morning, well, not this morning, we spoke about this morning, but I didn't know what he was going to share. And I've written here about recognizing who the fathers in the house are, and the older men and women who have mentored us, guided us, served us with their joy, and haven't really even realized it, or the massive impact that they've had on our lives. And one thing I would urge you to do maybe today, if you feel that it's right, is to pick up your phone to someone who has mentored you, coached you, fathered you, so preparing you to be sent out, and to just thank them for what they've done. We're good at doing that when people have passed away, but to receive that when you're alive and strong and well, to know that you have had such a massive impact in someone's life is just so encouraging. I got a message from John Matthews this morning. It's like my dad saying, my boy, son, do well. And that was such, again, a service that people just do on and on and on. And so when we talk about joy and serving, it's those kind of things, to just do it with absolute peace. And if it's natural for you, it comes easy. It just happens. I want to finish off now with talking about celebrating. It talks later on in the passage about Timothy and his journey on, and then talks about Epaphroditus. Paul mentions him as a brother, a soldier, a messenger. And it talks about his struggles. It makes reference to that he nearly died for the work that he had done. And he's coming home, he's maybe homesick, he needs to come back to be loved, to be honored. And yesterday we were on a Zoom course. Willie and Hazel were there with us as well, about missionaries like ourselves returning back, re-engaging into society, re-engaging into church. And some of the stories we heard were quite difficult, of people who were really struggling in that space, coming back, being hurt, not quite knowing what they're doing, where they're doing, how it's going to happen. But our story is extremely different to that. As we said goodbye to South Africa, there are some really important people that we had to say goodbye to. And for me, it was the young people that we had worked with. So I wanted to show you a couple of pictures here. This is of a youth group of young people that we had worked with for many, many years. And I want you to look at the girls at the front. Those are sisters. They were the Ngwabi family. I was involved in burying their mother. Debbie put 3 of those young girls and their brother into a children's home in about 2004 or 5. And we loved these girls amazingly. And the mother said to us, please just do one thing for me. Look after my children. And we promised that we would do that. Next slide there, Johnny. This is a picture of these 3 young girls who are now women, about 6 weeks ago. As we shared a lifetime that we have spent with them. One of the young girls is married with 2 kids. She's pregnant with the 3rd kid. She's the one who looks a bit chubby at the front. She sends us messages. She sent me a message yesterday. She always does that, just checking in. How you doing? We found her birth father about 18 months ago. And she asked me and Debbie and another couple to come with us because she wanted to introduce her birth father to her father and her mother. And we had a great opportunity to do that. There's another young girl there wearing the red. She worked for us in CCP for a number of years. She has 4 children. She is an awesome young woman. Wendy, she's my runner. Whenever she's in trouble, she runs away. And she's getting married. And she said to me, Uncle Rob, will you please be my father and walk me up that aisle? And before you do that, will you ask your own daughters if it's all right for you to do that? And that for me is just unbelievable, to have journeyed and deposited the love of Jesus in these girls. They all love Jesus. And I just want to show you this last slide here. Some of you would have seen this man in person. Some of you have seen this photograph before many times. I love it. It's a young man called Plymon Zimu. He stopped working to look after the 5 children that he was left with as a 21-year-old man to do. And he did it really, really, really well. I met him 3 days before we left, He's massive now. He's massive then, but now he's massive. He goes to the gym every single morning for about 4 hours, then works in the church. He says, Rob, I come to the gym every day because going out in the community is dangerous for me because they're not Christians. And I said there was times in my life when serving wasn't joyful, and there was a time when I was very ill. And he was in my dream, and he had been treated really badly in my dream. He had just got a new job. He was working in a department store, and he was being told off by his employer. And this is my dream. And then he was sacked. And I remember trying to run after him and try and run after the boss. And I remember I was running up waterfalls, going through flyer, all these things in my dream. and I just heard this so clearly. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And I realized that it was nothing to do with me and who I was. And sometimes I forgot who I was actually serving. And it was the Lord I was serving to be able to make these things happen. So, as I come to a close, we are back here now. We met with Paul and Martin in April of 2019. And I shared with them some of our thoughts about coming back. And they said, we're not going to let you come back unless you have scripture and there's some real purpose about you coming back. And I said, cool, that's great. And last year when I had coronavirus, I was stuck in my bedroom for 14 days to do nothing. And God arrested me in a time and space and gave me a scripture. And it was really about Jesus feeding the 5,000. And what it says at the end of that was that he sent the disciples away so that he could finish up and disperse the crowd. And I suddenly realized that God had given me an opportunity and saying, well, I finish up what I'm doing here in South Africa. And that for us was just a huge sense of move. It talks about Peter then stepping out of the boat in the storm and everything was going on. And Jesus went up and he rescued him and he just reached out. That's what it said. He said he reached out and he grabbed him. Now, I've saved many people in the water from surfing, and it's never as easy as just reaching out. You've got to do a lot of work to save them. But Jesus just reached out, put him back in the boat, the place where he's fed, took him to the other side and fed the 4,000. And so I came out very confident and full of zeal, saying, Debs, I know what God has spoken to me. And whatever I'm doing in South Africa, we're going to do back in Northern Ireland. God spoke to my wife, spoke to my kids at different times, and we moved here really seamlessly through this whole COVID situation and came back and arrived on the 15th. And so I was heading up a homeless project. We'd developed it for 3 years. And now I'm working for the Simon community, Northern Ireland's largest homeless project, as one of the senior managers for young people's services. And so my encouragement for us all is to just really lean on the Lord and listen to his voice and to ask for joy. If we don't have joy, to ask, Lord, reveal to me what it is that you want for me to be able to share, to be able to be involved in the people around me, so that I don't grumble and that I don't do it for anyone else, but I do it for you, knowing that that I can do all things through you. So I pray that this has been a message that has encouraged us all. I don't know if there are people here who don't know Jesus who are listening, and I would love to just pray with us as we close. Father God, we just thank you so much for your word, Lord, for how real it is and some real practical steps about it, Lord. I pray for anyone here who has a desire on their heart to go and serve, Lord, to listen and be obedient, Lord, to see how they can follow, Lord, and to celebrate everything that you have in store for them. Lord, for people who are struggling, Lord, who are tired, who are burnt out or feel just a lack of joy, Lord, I pray for them, Lord. And I pray for us as a community, Lord, to really press into you, Lord, as we press into the community who are around us. Lord, and if there's anyone there who doesn't know Jesus, it's really simple. You just ask God to come into your life, to ask him to forgive you of your sins and to follow him. So, guys, thank you so much. We live at 12 Ballymena Road. I know you're not allowed to come in, but you can hoot your horn as you go past them. We'll wave. We're the house with no curtains, so if it's in the morning time and the lights are on, just kind of look the other way. Okay, so have a great weekend, rest of your weekend, and have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.